Joined here by Moa. Very nice to speak to you, thanks.
You're welcome.
It's been 10 years since Digital Myztikz got one of your tracks voted onto John Peel's Festive 50. Did it feel at the time like that was going to be the main exposure you had?
Back then?
Yeah, back then.
You know, I was, well, it's a long time ago now. John Peel was obviously, you know, an unbelievable man who was a real pioneer in what he'd done. And he was actually the first person to play my music on mainstream radio, as well as a handful of other people like Distance. I think he used to play like Mark 1 and stuff back then as well. And you know, I didn't even know he was playing it. I didn't even know, you know, he was into what we was doing. So it was a complete surprise. And I remember them actually contacting me back then, you know, to give an exclusive. So we played a couple of exclusive tracks. But yeah, you know, it was a complete surprise to me back then, you know. And I can't remember the last time I even remembered or thought of that actually. So
I mean, obviously there's a lot has happened since then. How do you approach performing with DMZ now that you guys have kind of diverged pretty broadly across the dubstep spectrum?
It's just the same, you know. It's like, you know, we all come up together as you know, we've known each other for many years, and things naturally just take shape. You know, we never try to force anything. And that goes with the music that we was writing and the dance that we used to put, you know, that we put on. Nothing was really planned, nothing was really thought out. Everything just really happened naturally, you know. And it's the same how things have spread out. It's just the same, you know. And it's nice that people are allowed to go their own way. You know, that's what I think music should be about. It should be about being creative and about following your own path, you know. And just because you start something together, it doesn't mean you have to continue doing the same thing time and time again,
sure.
You know. So for me, you know, where we don't play as often together anymore, you know, when we do come together, it's just that extra special, you know.
Awesome.
So
yeah, speaking about things being special, I mean, you've got a lot of projects at the moment that have branched out from just DJing. And when I saw you last month in London at the Red Bull Music Academy Upfront project, you played a 4-hour set. Does that kind of extended set time or those kind of differences keep things fresh and interesting for you as a selector? Do you ever feel yourself getting a bit disillusioned with purely DJing?
No, never felt that way. The only thing that you do feel, which is slightly, I guess, on the downside, is you can feel extremely exhausted.
Yeah. With
all the travelling and that kind of consistency of travelling. But no, you know, I still now, I still feel like I treat my shows like my first and my last, you know.
Oh.
I still feel very privileged to be able to do this on a regular basis. No, playing DJ shows is certainly not like fading away for me. You know, the reason why you know, I start to play longer sets is because actually when I go away and I travel, a lot of the time you'd be like the main headliner, and a lot of people say, oh, you can just play as long as you want. Yeah. And so I end up playing 3-4 hour sets anyway in some places, you know. And there's you know, there's a handful of promoters around there that will tell you that, you know, I was supposed to play an hour and a half or 2 hours and I ended up playing 3 or 4. So for me it's nice to play longer sets because I don't play necessarily in a style where it's, you know, like fast and furious. You know, I like to be able to let things roll out. So for me, if I've got 4 hours, then I can really go everywhere I want, you know. So
yeah, I mean, you started out with some jazz at that time. You kind of had like, it seemed like you'd given your own intro to your DJ set. I suppose when you're that long, you can really tailor it to your own capabilities. Yeah, well, the reason why I always used to start with something that wasn't what I made was because the first show I ever played was at the End. Yeah. And it was back in 2004, and it was for Aphex Twins record label. It was Reflex Records. They did the grime compilations. Sure, yeah. And we did the second one with Code 9 and Lothar and me and Koki. And I got asked to play that. I never DJ'd in a big environment before, so I was kind of, you know, I was pretty nervous about it. Obviously, it being the End as well. So I thought to myself, all right, before I play, I'm just gonna like set myself my own space, my own zone. So I always used to start with Augustus Pablo records. And that ended up, you know, changing to being anything that I wanted, just to get myself in a certain vibe, and also to share something that I was feeling with the audience that come to hear me as well, you know. So my first tracks, I've been very lucky over the years to have some exclusives for some people. I don't know if you know a track by Mark Pritchard called Question Mark. All right.
I was, I think, the only one to have that for about a year.
Really? Yeah,
and I played that track everywhere, literally around the world, for a year as my first tune. And Mark had never played it out, and we played a show in Barcelona together for Red Bull, actually. And this is a couple of years ago. I think this is 2007 or 8. And I said to him, watch this, man. Watch this tune, how people respond to it. And he didn't believe me, because it's just a drone for 6 minutes.
Really?
You know? And the way that people responded, it happened in Barcelona that night as well, and he was shocked. And yeah, I wish I released it, actually, but it come out on a friend of ours label called Ho Hum. So it's a really nice piece of music to check out.
You mentioned travelling, and it's obviously it's been 2 years now, almost, I think, since you made the first trip with Giles Peterson over to Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
You're playing live tonight with a band for Deviation, and you'll be bringing the show to Croatia as one of our headliners for Dimensions. And the album obviously came out, what, 9-10 months ago, last summer.
September.
Do you feel detached at all from the experience, or do shows like these kind of keep you connected to it, I suppose?
However the music gets played, I guess it always keeps you connected to it in somewhat, but it's always changing.
Yeah.
And what's really nice for me about the project is that obviously it was totally different from anything that I'd done previously, and it started off in Havana, in Cuba, with Roberto Fonseca and his band playing traditional Cuban rhythms for me, as almost like an educational kind of like field trip to teach me about Cuban rhythms. And with those rhythms, you know, I transformed them and manipulated them and built music from what they gave me. So it kind of married that electronic with the acoustic, maybe like abstract with traditional.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And then to play the live show, it had to incorporate musicians. I couldn't just stand there with my laptop and do my thing, because it wouldn't feel right.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see how, you know, Ollie and Szatan, the musicians, the percussionists, and Swindle, who plays the keys, it's interesting to see how they've interpreted the rhythms and their parts, and how they've replayed it to create the show with me, you know. So yeah, you know, to me it's not the same as when it started in Cuba. It's just constantly moving and taking new shapes and forms. But I never played really any of the music in my DJ sets. Okay. So it really has its own life, aside from that, you know, which is nice, because it's just different energy and yeah, it's nice to have variation, you know?
You mentioned that it was kind of like an educational field trip first time round, and you've obviously come back from Cuba kind of revitalised, and you seem to have like renewed zeal for your music and your art. Do you feel that the musicians there learnt from you? Because it must have been a complete culture clash, and if so, could you see kind of transformations as it was evolving in their kind of reactions to your own music?
I don't know, because you know, like Roberto Fonseca, for example, he's an unbelievable pianist, unbelievable ear. You know, to sit in a room and see him create something, which, you know, is I don't want to say it was for me, but you know, it was for me to go and take away and to try and dissect. I don't know what he could have learnt from me. I feel that those guys were so far beyond what I understand in terms of in music. Yeah. You know, I'm not sure.
Do you not feel it could be the same way for them, watching you create with kind of, I suppose, more up-to-date technology? They must be thinking, I have no idea how this guy's doing any of this.
I think what they were interested in was how the low frequencies were so heavy and powerful in the mix, but they weren't blowing up the speakers. You know, that's what I was talking to the engineer who was recording everything, and he was like, you know, talking about the sub bass. But you know, I worked with Davies Suarez on a few occasions, and you know, you definitely connect with some people in more of a, I guess, I don't want to say like a deeper way, but just maybe there's just a different kind of understanding, so it makes you want to work more together, you know. So you know, I think me and Danai hope to do more stuff in the future, and I think she heard something in my sound which she could connect with, which she didn't necessarily feel before, you know. But you know, for me, what we hear is one thing, but the spirit for me of the music is the same across all countries or people, you know.
I mean, just talking to you in this interview, you have a very kind of methodical way of thinking about things. Do you reckon you have certain character traits which enabled you to get the most out of your trip to Cuba? Do you reckon? I mean, I've seen you speak about the kind of the lifestyle and how it's less rushed, less frenetic. Do you reckon that's something that you connected with when you got there originally?
Yeah, for sure. You know, as you get older and all those things, you know, you definitely want to slow down a little bit. You know, so I connected with that pace. I don't know, you know, I'm not one that wants to go to somewhere like Havana and find a McDonald's. You know what I'm saying? I want to eat the food that's there, and I don't necessarily want to go just to the tourist spot. I want to check the underground as well, you know. So I don't know, I think that perhaps having that nature allowed me to see some things and hear some stories that I might not have had I been different, you know.
Cool. It seems to be quite a self-contained entity, Cuba. And it must have been strange, I guess, when you first kind of entered that bubble. But how's it been coming out and becoming an active proponent of exporting their culture? Do you feel that that weighs heavy on your shoulders, or is it something you're enjoying at the moment?
I don't see it that way.
Okay.
I didn't feel different when I walked in there. You know, it's the one thing I've begun to see and understand about travelling is, regardless of where you go, regardless of the people and their kind of their education and their culture, you know, you find brothers and sisters everywhere. And that's what it was like in Cuba. I felt so privileged to be there, and for these amazing musicians to just really open up and share with me what they've been doing all their lives, you know. And you know, I didn't see it in that way, you know. I didn't feel like an alien, and I don't feel like I'm going into Cuba and, as you say, take some kind of component and presenting it to the world that this is Cuba. You know, for me, this is really Havana meets South Norwood, you know, which is where I'm from. It's the merge of those two worlds, you know, which is as simple as that for me.
Cheers for speaking to us. One question, which is quite a big one.
Go on then.
There's a lot of, whenever kind of words are thrown around next to your name, you have pioneer, innovator. I've read demigod before. Do you ever stop and consider the impact that you personally have had on a very large part of British culture in the last few years, and if so, how do you process it?
It's very kind of you to say such a thing. Again, I don't see it that way. So
that's modest.
You know, I really respect. You know, I feel very privileged and very honoured that people consider myself and DMZ and things that we've contributed and shared with people in that way. But you know, I'm just in my studio trying to create music and trying to feed something that is within me, you know. And I just hope that when I share that, it can give some sort of positivity to people, you know. So yeah, you know, in that respect, I don't deal with it because I don't perceive myself in that light at all.
Cool. All right. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers, man. That was really good. Thanks.
Respect, man. Thank you. Peace, man.